If your goal was to destroy a religion, how would you do it? What better way than corrupting it from the inside, making it an enemy of itself? In the United States and Europe in the 2020s, things are happening in Christianity that were unheard of for 2,000 years. Entire Christian denominations teach that sexual morality doesn't exist, that women can be priests because there's no difference between men and women, and even that all religions and non-religions are equally valid.
There are gay, lesbian, and transgender children, some who fear for their lives.
Fortunately, there are many Christian denominations who reject these beliefs, but they have still spread to a disturbing level. These views and others like them would have horrified Christians of even 100 years ago. But how did things get this way? One major cause is the influence of liberalism on Christianity. To be clear, liberalism in this sense is different from how it's used in contemporary American politics. Both the Democrat and Republican parties are liberal parties. They both believe in and support the political philosophy of liberalism. With liberal democracies from France to America experiencing a period of rapid decline, liberalism across the world is on the retreat. One of the things this video will show is how liberalism's fatal flaws were predicted by Christian thinkers. So what exactly is liberalism? Liberalism first emerged in Western Europe and the Americas as a political movement seeking to put what they saw as Enlightenment principles into government. Liberalism defines itself as individualistic, anti-authoritarian, and focused on natural rights. Now, Christianity as a religion with collective responsibilities, authoritarian rules, and traditionalistic values has always been treated by liberalism with suspicion, even at times outright hostility. It's important to note that liberalism is a political philosophy, whereas Christianity is a religion. In principle, the religious and political realm can work in harmony and not be in conflict. However, liberalism creates a conflict with how it treats Christianity in historically Christian countries. Liberalism is heavily associated with the principles of 1789, that is, those of the French Revolution. One of those core principles is the abolition of any kind of authority derived from God. This isn't just a trait of French liberalism, but of all liberalism. Liberalism supports the religious agnosticism of the state, meaning no religion takes priority over any other. At least on paper, countries like America today clearly lack a separation of synagogue and state. At a quick glance, many things liberals believe sound almost Christian. Human rights, protecting freedom, delivering justice for all. But the devil is in the details. Liberalism and Christianity have entirely different foundations and definitions for all of these words. While Christians believe in a divine basis of morality that guides their view of rights and freedoms, liberals do not. To liberalism, natural rights simply exist and have nothing really to do with God. Christians believe society should be based on families. Liberalism believes it should be based on individuals and minority groups. Consider today how liberalism prides itself on things like feminism, LGBT rights, and mass immigration. One could even call these things the cornerstone of modern liberalism. The early liberal writer Thomas Paine, author of the book Age of Reason, declared that Christianity was not divinely inspired. As an early liberal, he advocated Christianity having no place in law. Many of the writers of the American Constitution were influenced by Paine and deism, and thus, despite many of them being Christian themselves, wrote a constitution that doesn't mention God once and effectively states that all religions are equal. But Christian thinkers fought back against the beliefs of deism and liberalism. In the mid-1800s, Pope Pius IX wrote that liberalism's religious indifference was antithetical to Catholicism. His most famous document on this matter was the 1864 Syllabus of Errors. It pointed out all the contradictions between liberalism and Catholicism. One of the biggest was that in Catholic countries, liberals wanted to remove Catholicism as the religion of the state. The papacy had always advocated that in places where Catholics were the majority, Catholicism should also be the state religion. Liberalism rejected this, demanding a state that was religiously indifferent. Pope Pius warned that this religious indifference would lead to a corruption of public morals. He also pointed out many cases where liberals engaged in direct attacks on the church, such as confiscating its land and arresting clergy for performing their duties. He finished by denouncing what he called the synagogue of Satan for leading attacks on the church. They try to submit the Church of God to the most cruel servitude, to undermine the foundations on which it rests, to contaminate its splendid qualities, and, moreover, to strike it with frequent blows, to shake it, to overthrow it, and, if possible, to make it disappear completely from the earth. All subsequent popes echoed similar condemnations of liberalism, the core problem being that liberalism demoted the place of divine and natural law to mere opinions. Pope Leo XIII wrote in the encyclical Immortal Dei, "To hold that there is no difference in religions that are unlike each other, and even contrary to each other, most clearly leads in the end to the rejection of all religion in both theory and practice. This is the same thing as atheism, however it may differ from it in name." The academic Bernard Laurent wrote in Catholicism and Liberalism, Two Ideologies in Confrontation, "The different popes, each in his own way, never failed to lament the impact of this revolution on human values. They all refused to see society subordinated to individual freedom, and to allow human and moral purpose to be thus undermined." In terms of economics, he wrote, "The Church condemned a society that placed capital above work." Clashes between liberalism and Christianity weren't limited to the philosophical sphere. In many places, they also went to physical war. Two prominent examples are the Cristero Uprising in Mexico and the Spanish Civil War of 1936 to 1939. Now that we've established the philosophical differences between liberalism and Christianity, it's time to dive into exactly how liberalism corrupts Christianity today. There are two key ways it does this, from within and from the outside. Let's first look at how it undermines Christianity from within.
People of faith haven't always been welcoming to the LGBT community, and in fact, many times people of faith have been outright contemptuous of LGBT people, and Jesus' message was always one of inclusion and welcome.
First, liberalism creates a degenerate culture where behaviors that are forbidden in Christianity are tolerated and even promoted. Think of today how porn websites are on every computer. Young girls are encouraged to start OnlyFans and take birth control, and people are told that their individual gratification is all that matters in life. Public schools outlaw teaching about God, while homosexuality and casual sex are promoted in television. Tens of millions of people grow up in and are marinated in this culture. The diet they're fed of individualism and rejection of authority leads people to think that church hierarchies are bad, and that their personal interpretation of God should take priority. The effects today are clear. These same people go to church and demand that Christianity change to match their liberal, degenerate values. A perfect example of this is homosexuality. Christianity has always taught that homosexual acts are a grave sin and against natural law. But liberal culture teaches the opposite, that homosexuality is fine, just another lifestyle choice. These views are obviously irreconcilable. Pressure is then put on church officials to change Christian teaching to be more liberal. Many Christian denominations have done exactly this. In 2024, the United Methodist Church removed its rule that homosexuality is incompatible with Christian teaching. The Anglican Church and several other Protestant denominations did the same in recent decades. And even in denominations that officially teach homosexuality as a sin, many of their members ignore it. In Catholicism, the official church teaching in the Catechism says, basing itself on sacred scripture, which presents homosexual acts as acts of grave depravity, tradition has always declared that homosexual acts are intrinsically disordered. They are contrary to natural law. They do not proceed from a genuine, effective, and sexual complementarity. Under no circumstances can they be approved. Now, despite this crystal clear teaching, polls show that huge amounts of self-identified Catholics in liberal countries say they support gay marriage. Notably, the polls found that people who attend church the most were least likely to support LGBT, while those who never attend were the most likely. The point here is clear. Liberalism creates a culture of values against Christian morality. Even Pope Francis, in trying to be accepted by the liberal world, has said things to downplay traditional Catholic values. Pope Francis represents what we could call an accommodationist wing of Catholicism towards liberal social values. I think the Church should be going in the opposite direction from this. It's not just LGBT. Christianity traditionally stood against things that violated the virtue of chastity or sexual morality. This includes acts like abortion, no-fault divorce, and pornography. Unfortunately, liberal countries around the globe have legalized these things and even made them a normal part of society. Christians in liberal countries are bombarded on a daily basis with things that go against the very essence of what the religion stands for. This makes Christianity weaker as both the common people and clergy become more liberal. Much of Catholicism's internal problems with liberalism link back to the Second Vatican Council and its liberalization of important church teachings on issues like human rights and Catholicism's relation to Judaism. It's important to note that the Second Vatican Council happened in the wake of World War II, as the Allied powers and Soviets controlled most of Europe. This doubtlessly had a major influence on the Catholic teachings Vatican II changed. This is a good segue into how Christianity is undermined by liberalism from the outside, which is much more straightforward. Liberal countries claim to be religiously neutral, but in many cases pass laws that are directly anti-Christian. In the United States, famous cases involve attacks on Catholic charities and hospitals who refuse to tolerate abortion or LGBT. Across the country, adoption centers have been forced to shut down for their refusal to put children into the homes of gay couples. It didn't matter to the liberal state that the church was providing extremely valuable services in other areas. They didn't follow liberal moral dogma, so they were forced to shut down. Civil rights law is also weaponized against Christians. There is the famous case of Masterpiece Cake Shop, where a Christian businessman refused to provide cakes for gay weddings and was targeted with lawfare as a result. In 2012, the Colorado Civil Rights Division unleashed an order that was an anti-Christian tirade against the bakery. It demanded that the cake shop's owner, Jack Phillips, do whatever the gay couple wanted. It compared Christianity to supporting slavery and effectively said it would be good for humanity if Christianity disappeared. Keep in mind, this wasn't a Reddit or atheist forum, it was an official government body of the state of Colorado saying this. Their anti-Christian rhetoric was so extreme that the Supreme Court later threw out their order for being obviously religiously biased. But even though the Supreme Court ruled for the Christian in this case, there are dozens of cases where they did nothing and let Christians be prosecuted. Situations like these force Christians to choose between following the laws of God or the laws of secular liberalism. Then there are groups like the Satanic Temple and the Freedom from Religion Foundation who really hammer this home. They exist for the sole purpose of removing Christianity from all areas of public life in the name of liberalism. And no discussion of Christianity and liberalism would be complete without noting how liberalism alters Christianity's view of race. In Western countries today, there are boatloads of Christians who leap at the chance to engage in social justice over the slightest inconvenience that a white person causes to a non-white person. But when a non-white person objectively abuses a white person, these same Christians are nowhere to be found. They don't care. I don't believe the origin of this hypocrisy is Christianity. Rather, it's liberalism. Liberalism trains people, Christian or not, to see white people as a privileged class that can never be done wrong under any circumstances. Many Christians foolishly adopt this racial worldview because they weren't taught any better. Only in liberal democracies do you get movies where white Christians are indiscriminately slaughtered like subhumans, and it's treated like a joke. This doesn't happen in so-called authoritarian countries, which alone is reason for thought. At the end of the day, there is no real difference between modern liberalism and Satanism, as world leaders like Vladimir Putin have noted. As I was making this video, it came out that the United States government, through the USAID program, has been funding anti-Christian, anti-family causes around the globe. To those of us who understand liberalism, this isn't surprising. Fortunately, in the 2020s, liberalism is in decline around the world. The Christian denominations who completely succumb to liberal values are also the ones losing the most members and dying the fastest. The inherent lies and contradictions of liberal Christianity will cause it to collapse.